Okay, so my reading is Indigenous Traditions and Deep Ecology by John Grimm. Basically, he explores the crossovers and differences between the relationships of indigenous traditions and deep ecology. And three of these comparative consideration areas are the approaches, the politics, and religions. Um, First off, I want to talk about deep ecology. So it's a call to knowing. It refers to a philosophical school with an activist agenda and demonstrates changes over the years. It was introduced by a Norwegian philosopher, Arnes. So presently, there are thousands of indigenous societies under extreme pressure, not only to adapt to more commonly understood economic lifestyles, but to open their lands for exploitation of their resources by big corporations. Indigenous traditions demonstrate the two key norms of deep ecology, which is self-realization and biocentric equality. I think what might be more helpful environmentally are efforts to understand indigenous people's thought regarding diversity of ways of life, differing community attitudes towards their surrounding regions, destructive pressures of globalization on their homelands, the rights of indigenous people to express their positions in a public forum. So in this scenario, the indigenous peoples have a place at the table of deep ecological thought. So their thought is taken into consideration. Specific traditions have important roles in their particularity problems and potential for understanding human and earth interaction. I think this would be very important for our society these days. So seeking to expand his dialogue, Grimm considers deep ecology and indigenous traditions in the terms of their various approaches or ways of knowing the earth. So indigenous traditions, they're actual dynamic societies whose identities are embedded in the land, language, subsistence practices, kinship, narratives, and customs. So these interrelated activities constitutes the indigenous ways of life. Misunderstandings of the complexity of indigenous concepts that come together as a means of thinking about community relatedness to the earth. In comparative texts, deep ecology can be differentiated from a particular indigenous traditions. Environmental knowledge oriented more towards individuals than communities. So communities differ a lot in indigenous contexts. For example, the concept of a person extends to the natural world in regard for an individual and is also thought of like legs, rocks, trees, and even wind. So indigenous ways of knowing the world were not expressed abstractly, but in the symbolic language of visions and narratives intimately connected to kinship. So, for example, teaching a daughter how to gather grass and weave a basket, and a son hunting and trapping, these really highlight the knowings of living in a bioregion for indigenous groups. So again, as I said earlier, deep ecology approaches the world as a call to knowing and has philosophical, moral, and political implications for individuals. And again, the key norms of deep ecology are self-realization and biocentric equality. These indicate moving beyond the dualistic view of humans as the subject, so the knowing, and then in a natural world as objects known by the human. So these help to differentiate that. In the reading, he talks about a Newtonian diced worldview, and this has a mechanistic science that's rejected as a form of shallow ecology. It addresses environmental problems from like a technological fixed mentality, meaning that mechanistic science is seen as an instrument that conceives that all human and natural activity can be fixed by human technological advancement. So I personally disagree with this. I think that if we could stop climate change, why wouldn't we be doing it already? So like this view really focuses on like us being able to destroy and us just cleaning up the mess, or we think we can clean up the mess with all these technological advancements that we have. So radical investment where individuals question and explore larger understandings of themselves, I think is important. So say like you question yourself, the gaps in your knowledge, such as like meaning of your material body and character of your thought. I think that's very important when thinking about environmental aspects of your life. There's also a search for cosmological perspective of relatedness to the whole, so like the origins of the universe and astronomy and why our planet is how it is. In addition to preserving species, an evolutionary and ecological ethic is concerned with preserving natural processes and other biotic wholes. So this goes with safeguarding genetic diversity, ensures the health and integrity of the biosphere as a whole. So we think of it as one big web, not like different patches of like preserves or whatever. So the golden rule of ethics is talked about in the reading, and this is a quote from Aldo Leopold. So he says, "A thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. If it is wrong otherwise." So this quote helps to frame the biosphere as a whole, and it helps to really ground the deep ecology movement. I think that this really is a golden rule, and I think that if we took this quote into consideration when making decisions about our waste, our really anything, if it preserves the integrity, stability, and beauty of a biotic community, so really of the world, if it helps to preserve that, then it is good. And if it's not, then it's wrong. And I think that it would be hard, but if we all took that quote into consideration, making all of our decisions, I think that it would very much impact and change a lot of what's going on from in our ecological standpoint in the world right now. So moving on, Grimm talks about the Maori a lot. So the Maori from New Zealand, they call themselves Tangata Wenua, which translates to people of the land. So they ground their identity in the land. The land is their connection to cosmic forces as well as the source of their personal life. Empirical observation in the Maori worldview is accompanied by other modes of knowing. Interactions with the environment brings humans into contact with the mana, or the inherent standing of reality. This is explained and affirms different attitudes associated with the hard mana, which is competition and aggression, and the soft mana, which is compassion and cooperation, different aspects within a being. So all creatures possess mana, suggesting that all reality has intrinsic worth as well as personal life. A Maori proverb translate to, "The blood of humans comes from food, our welfare comes from the land." And this kind of links blood and food, and that comes from the death of one's non-human kin, so like plants and animals. The taking of life brings another set of inherent forces into the conceptual thought that provides support for Maori's traditional environmental knowledge. In addition to the mana, all food comes with individual tapu, or sacredness. Subsistence practices involve treatment of our kin, so the creatures, plants, and animals, in ways that may be harmful to them but beneficial to ourselves. The inner blood or life depends on correct spiritual relations with the creatures, including ritual treatment of their tapu, or sacredness. Welfare or material prosperity for the Maori flows from ethical relations with the land, so they're very tied to the land, and they think about the welfare and the value to the plants and animals of the region. The ability of human individuals embedded within larger kin groups to establish and maintain right relationships with the mana and tapu of creatures. These processes establish the life force of the people. The Maori appear to have maximally invested themselves in cosmology. They have adopted cosmology as their privileged idiom of their self-identification, sense of values, and political social theory. The cosmological position establishes all creatures, not just humans, in a web of kinship. So further on in the reading, it talks about Arnaz and the framed deep ecology platform, and it's based off 8 basic principles. He really talks strongly about number 6 and number 8. So number 6, politics must therefore be changed. These policies affect basic economic, technological, ideological structures. The resulting state of affairs will be deeply different from the present. And then number 8, those who subscribe to the foregoing points have an obligation, directly or indirectly, to try and implement the necessary changes. So the old order of politics that must be changed, according to this early presentation of deep ecology, is the complete subordination of any and all life to economic commodification and industrial exploitation. So my question is, do you guys agree or disagree with this potential change in politics? Do you think that it could help our current ecological standpoint? If we'd like put some of these into play, let me know. So deep ecology critiques the dominant political agenda for implementing sustainable practices only for human welfare, while other species continually lose habitat toward possible extinction. That's where we're at right now. It's been going on for a while, but like I said, let me know if you think those will help. These deep ecological positions echoes Henry David Thoreau's quote, and his quote says, "In wilderness is the preservation of the world. Life consists of wilderness. The most alive is the wildest, not yet subdued to man. Its presence refreshes him." So I really liked this quote. I think this quote linked with the other quote would really help us just as humans to really think that it's not just our world, it's all these creatures' world. So wilderness here meant a place in which humans were absent, was a space of spiritual solace and nourishment. I don't know about you, but when I go in the wilderness, I feel whole. Makes me feel complete. It's nice. Ironically, this image of wilderness as a solace reverses the early American imaging of the savage wilderness in Pilgrim times with the Native Americans. Indigenous peoples' religion focuses on a particular site seen by deep ecologists as an affirmation of wilderness. That's a natural site whose aesthetic, mythic, historic, or religious importance calls for special community. Our NACE concerns with religion are more experimental and institutional. So he could quote, "I'm not much interested in ethics or morals. I'm interested in how we experience the world. Ethics follows from how we experience the world. If you experience the world and so you don't kill. If you articulate your experience, then it can become a philosopher religion." John Seed, he's an Australian deep ecologist, expresses religious institutions Arne speaks of in a way that's closer to what Indigenous people feel. So again, quote, "As the implications of evolution, ecology are internalized, there is an identification without life. Alienation subsides. So I am protecting the rainforest develops into I am the rainforest protecting myself." So this way of thinking of yourself within the rainforest or any environment makes it easier to care for and respect. And again, this with the last 2 quotes, I think if we share this and practice it, we can do a lot of change. So when Indigenous religions are considered in these intuitive journeys of self-realization, some of the following themes provide orientation for understanding the differences between Indigenous religions and deep ecology, namely kinship, spatial and biographical relations with a place. On the other hand, traditional environmental knowledge and cosmology are themes that emphasize shared concerns of Indigenous communities and deep ecology. So another group of people, the Temyar people of Malaysia, they speak of their quest to contact the kayak, the form taken by the upper soul of a spiritual being in the Malayan rainforest. So such intimate relations with the landscape are often evident in the names given to specific places, trees, rocks, rivers, Naming the landscape expresses sacred regard for the environment through biographical memory, personal religious experiences at a specific area. Indigenous environmental knowledge and deep ecology share respect for animal and plant life, though the conceptual bias for the respect is very different. So, for example, indigenous people believe animals willingly give up their lives for human need, and the people accept that gift from the animals on the religious basis. Deep ecology is focused on the biocentric equality, so the view that humans' needs are no more privileged than other species. Shifting our focus to this biocentric equality would drastically change our world if we actually put this into play. I think that people would be shocked because we are so used to having this convenience and like everything's about me, but this biocentric equality and like not human centric, if we are all on an equal playing field, I think that could drastically impact our everything in our society. Another comparison between deep ecology and indigenous religions are the felt experiences of interacting with the larger whole of reality. So cosmology is used here for humans to reflect upon their own bodies, social order, and understanding how the world works. For example, American Indians believe that it's breath that represents the most tangible expression of spirit in all living things. So anything that breathes, like moves, plants kind of move and breathe. So language is an expression of the spirit because it communicates thought and feeling. Breath and water and thought connect all living things. And then there's only 3 critiques that were raised of this reading. Anthropocentric view of the human as accumulating evolution. The interpretation of the religious depth of different cultural thought systems, and fixation on human technological capacities. So let me know if you disagree with any of those critiques. Yeah, and that's all.